Hello, everyone, and welcome to Credit Safe Webinars. My name is Nathan Kalb. I am your host. It is my privilege and pleasure to get to do this most weeks and enjoy meeting with you virtually and discussing topics that are important to you, whether you are a credit manager, a CFO, a business owner, or someone that is in the B2B industry. We want to be able to bring these things to you each and every week and have them make sense and be beneficial to you. So I want to thank you for being here with us and enjoying these because we enjoy putting them on. And, you know, like I said, we want to make sure that we have these and they're beneficial to you, that they are making sense for you. And to do that, we have to have that engagement and that discussion. So as we get started here today, I want to remind all of you that at the bottom of your screen, there's a little text bubble that says Q&A. If you've joined us before, you know that's the way to ask questions or to say something to me or to our speaker. But if you haven't before, that's the way to do it. Go down there. I will be monitoring that throughout our entire presentation, throughout our entire time together. So if you need to say something to me or if you have a question about the topic at hand, please put it there. With that being said, today's topic, the bankruptcy domino effect. We understand that bankruptcy is a huge topic. There's a lot that goes into it. Both our speaker today and myself are not lawyers. Neither of us have gone to law school, and we are not going to be answering those like deep legal questions. So if you have those, I invite you to come back in 2 days' time on Thursday at the same time, and we will be talking about legal considerations of bankruptcy. So we will have some lawyers, an expert panel of lawyers actually, that can answer those type of questions and can speak more to the legal side of things. We're talking more the business and credit management side of things today. But before I get into this with our speaker and I introduce him and kind of go into this with this, I want to kind of set the stage. A lot of us have been dealing with a very different 2020 than we expected. I think it's safe to say. And this pandemic has shifted how things were going. While we all understand in business that bankruptcy is part of what happens sometimes in business and that's how things go, it has accelerated this setup due to the pandemic this year. And we've seen a lot more of that. And it's caused some different changes to happen that maybe we weren't expecting. And when we think of the bankruptcies that have happened and stuff like that, a lot of times we're thinking these smaller businesses, these micro businesses that just couldn't do anything, didn't have the cash reserves and those type of things. But in all reality, when we're looking at this, we're looking at companies like this, like who you see on the screen. These household names have all declared bankruptcy in 2020. These companies are all in different industries. They have different supply chains. They have a different market segment. Some of them, you know, overlap, sure. We've got a couple of clothing companies, some retail companies, transportation, entertainment. You know, we've even got GNC and Gold's Gym that are in the fitness and health industries. You know, we've got these different things. All of these companies that are large, nationwide, international type companies are declaring bankruptcy this year. So we know that this is a topic that's out there. We know that this is going on, and it tracks maybe a little differently than what a lot of us are thinking. We were looking at the information getting ready for this, and Fortune put this this information out of the most bankruptcy filings for 2020 in the industry segments. And, you know, restaurants is number one. Okay, a lot of us could figure that one out, that's going to be high on the list. Restaurants were closed for a long time, then could only do some sort of takeout or curbside delivery or something like that. And in many, many parts of the US, they still can't be open for seating, even on a patio or anything like that. So we can understand that there's going to be restaurants filing there. But then if you look at the next three, the next two and three are, you know, the construction industry and real estate. A lot of those weren't shut down. The construction was allowed to happen. It was an essential business. So construction was able to continue in a lot of areas of the US. Houses were still able to be built. Buildings were still able to be built. Renovations were still able to happen, those type of things. And then on the other side of that, you've got real estate, which again, less people may have been interested in going in and out of people's homes, but there were still people that needed to move. Still people were buying and selling houses. But to have those be number 2 and 3 of the numbers of filings in 2020 is for me, I mean, maybe I'm just the only one out here in this audience that finds that off from what I would have expected. And then number 4 kind of blew my mind. is the health and medical industry. Like, wait a second, they're overwhelmed right now. They're going crazy. How is it that we're seeing that? I don't have necessarily all the answers to that from an economic or market standpoint. But the idea here that I want to talk about and set up even before Mark joins me, our speaker joins me, is that this is coming from all different angles, and it's not a one easy point a finger and understand type thing. This is a big issue that's affecting businesses across all market segments, all across the economy. And it's going to be, and Mark will touch on this more, but every one of us that is in business out there is going to be affected somehow, some way in this. There's going to be a touch point for us. So as we get into this, we just wanted to kind of set the stage on the size and scope and somewhat the gravity of the situation that we want to talk about. We like to have a good time, and we'll probably joke a little bit about some different things, but at the end of the day, this is something that is really going to affect businesses, especially in the B2B space. So we want to make sure that everybody has a firm grasp of that and kind of where we're going from here. But I will take up no more of your time. You did not come to the webinar to see me. You came to see the dapper man in the waistcoat and polka dot shirt, Mark Edwards. He is the managing director of Credit Safe USA, a registered global credit professional, and has been on the webinars with me before, and has spent a lot of time in the past and in recent times just taking an idea and focusing on this setup of bankruptcy, what that does, how that's affecting things. And so I couldn't think of a better person to bring on for this side of the bankruptcy conversation than Mark. So Mark, thanks so much for joining me, and welcome, bud.
Thank you, Nathan. Good to be here.
I am glad to have you. And let's just, I've kind of set a little bit of the stage, and I hope the audience will forgive me for doing that. But I want to start at a basic level. A lot of people have this concept of bankruptcy, whether it's from the show The Office, where they were yelling out in the office declaring bankruptcy, or they've seen a person do it, or they've experienced it through a business, or they saw those big companies declaring bankruptcy. But in all reality, what really is bankruptcy? Like, what is it from an essence, a definition?
So just before we dive into that, I just want to reiterate what you were saying, Nathan. This webinar is not designed to be to give legal advice. And if you have specific questions, I would recommend speaking to a competent legal counsel. But business bankruptcy is complex and obviously very serious, but it doesn't necessarily always mean it's the end of the road for the business. So there are many businesses out there that have become bankrupt and survived and gone on to flourish. So bankruptcy is a federal legal procedure for dealing with debt problems of both individuals and businesses. Specifically, it's a case that's filed under one of the chapters of Title 11 of the United States Code. This is also known as the Bankruptcy Code. Mm-hmm. The fundamental goal of bankruptcy is to give debtors a financial fresh start from burdensome debts. Okay. You may also hear the term bankruptcy relief. Filing bankruptcy can help the debtor, whether that's a person or a business, make a plan to repay their debts. Bankruptcy cases normally begin when a debtor files a petition to the bankruptcy court. The petition will be filed either by an individual, spouses together, or by a corporation or other entity. Okay. All bankruptcies are handled in federal courts. And there are several types of bankruptcies, and these are usually referred to by their chapters. Okay. In general, for businesses, there's three common chapters. Chapter 12, which is applicable to farmers, and that's a really, we're not going to touch upon that. But okay. In most cases, you'll see a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 11. Right. Chapter 7 simply liquidates the company's assets, while the Chapter 11 allows the business to continue under a reorganization plan. Okay. Essentially, Chapter 7, the company will stop all operations and completely go out of business. Firms in the Chapter 7 bankruptcy are past the stage of reorganization and must sell off any non-exempt assets to pay creditors. Okay. So essentially, a trustee is appointed to liquidate or sell the assets. That money is used to pay off the debts. Creditors to a debtor then are divided into two: secured creditors, which are prioritized, and then unsecured creditors. On average, secured creditors will receive 77 cents on the dollar, and non-secured on average would receive 2 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
So there's a huge disparity there, and those are just averages. Every case is different. So there's different amounts. In a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the company doesn't go out of business, but it gives the business the opportunity to reorganize the debts in the hopes that it can reemerge as a healthy organization.
Okay. All right. So that 7 is that just liquidation. We're done. We're moving on. We're going to sell off what we can and pay off what we can. And then the 11 is we're going to reset this, kind of redo this, get almost a restart. A reorganization, like you were saying, and then pay off the debtors, of course, but then moving, in whatever the court's deem is okay, and then continue on in business in a form or fashion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, I mean, if this is happening, and there's these different types of bankruptcy and different things going on and all that, is there's certain things that credit managers, business owners, folks that are looking at this can see? Is there a writing on the wall? Is there a red flag flying that says, hey, this could be a problem? There's a chance that there's going to be some bankruptcy proceedings coming down the line that they can be looking for to try and avoid having to deal with this?
Yeah, so essentially what a credit manager is trying to do is to use information to predict an event in the future. So when we're looking to predict a bankruptcy or reduce the risk of being impacted by bankruptcy, the level of data that's available to aid your decision is going to be largely determined by the company size and the prominence of that company. So for example, a large, highly visible public company, the information is going to be far more readily available than a small local SME or micro entity.
Okay.
Nonetheless, good credit management is key here. So assuming the correct due diligence was done at the point of account origination, we're really talking about monitoring that account to track the following changes. So a couple of things I would be on the lookout for are frequent changes in key or senior management.
Okay.
Negative changes in the reported payment behavior of a said company. Negative changes in the payment frequency and speed to your business. So have things slowed down. Changes or difficulties in being able to reach that business. So perhaps you were able to speak to them every time you called, and now that's every other call. Keep an eye out for those things. We're also looking for the credit scores and credit ratings of that company being downgraded, and that could be done through a service like CreditSafe or Dun & Bradstreet Experian, or a combination of all of those. Mm-hmm. So a multi-bureau approach is sensible. We're also looking for negative changes in filed financials. If the company's either public or you're able to get your hands on their financials, and we're looking for things such as cash flow. So if a company's putting cash towards operating activities and still not earning a profit, there's a concern there. There could be large increases in cash because a company might have sold an asset to inflate their cash position to cover losses, or increased level of debt. The other thing that's really important to keep an eye out for is negative media events. So are there stories in the media where, perhaps a company is letting staff go, for example?
Okay. And that's both how we can see it coming to try and avoid it completely, or is there any difference of mitigating those things? If you can't avoid it completely, but is there a way to kind of mitigate your exposure to that?
So I think anyone that sells in the business to business space, dealing with a company that's bankrupt is going to be inevitable. And there's two sort of real things here. If you're dealing with a lower volume of accounts, each one of those accounts will represent a larger percentage of your annual sales revenue.
Sure.
So each one of those accounts, you would spend more time researching and making sure your due diligence is in place. Or if you're dealing with high volume accounts, the likelihood that you're going to incur a company bankruptcy or deal with a company that's become bankruptcy is going to be increased. But the key here again is just good credit policy. When someone's reaching their agreed tolerances, speak to your senior leadership and make sure you've got buy-in from them. Also, make sure that you are communicating with the debtor. If you're uncomfortable with offering or extending, beyond a certain point, ask for more information. If there's a reluctance, that might be a red flag. Okay.
So those fundamentals, really do help out in the long term, no matter what the situation is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got to ask the question because we titled the webinar this, and it's something I've heard you use, and I thought it was just a really good kind of a metaphor or allegory for what this is of this idea of a bankruptcy domino effect. So when you say something like that, what are you talking about?
This is a really interesting one. So one of the more common sales objections we hear, and I'm sure a lot of my sales colleagues are going to agree that the most common thing we hear is we only sell to blue chip companies and they're safe, or we only deal with big companies and we're not going to be impacted.
Right.
And as you showed earlier, Nathan, in one of the slides, you can see there's lots of big names, and I suspect there's going to be more to follow in 2020. But the domino or ripple effect is not an official term, rather than a phenomenon that we see whereby a significant bankruptcy of an organization will cause disruption through supply chains, regions, and in some cases, whole industries. So there are two examples that I find very interesting. The first is Jin Shipping. It was a Korean shipping line that filed for bankruptcy in 2016. At the time, it was one of the largest shipping companies in the world.
Sure.
At the time of bankruptcy, 96 of their ships were stranded at sea with a total cargo of about 14 billion. When we reviewed the debts, not we, but when the debts of the company were reviewed, it was estimated about $10.5 billion were owed to its creditors. So not only do we have massive number of companies whose supplies have never reached their final destination, and therefore you're never going to get paid. The timing of this was significant because it was around August, the actual bankruptcy. So a lot of companies were ramping up their supplies in anticipation for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And those goods, in a lot of cases, never actually got to their final destination. So we know that companies like Nike were impacted, but the biggest burden were to the smaller companies.
Sure.
The other interesting example here is Detroit. Now obviously not a business bankruptcy, rather than a municipal bankruptcy. Detroit filed for bankruptcy in July 2013. At the time, it was the largest municipal bankruptcy in the US.
Sure.
They had over 100,000 creditors. So over 100,000 people,
Wow.
Companies, businesses, organizations that were owed money or due money from Detroit. The interesting thing here is, I think we're all aware that Detroit's fortunes have been closely linked to the auto industry.
Sure.
Their bankruptcy was preceded by two major bankruptcies of Detroit companies in 2019 with Chrysler and General Motors, both who've obviously since emerged. But I think that's a clear example of the impacts that domino effect it can have.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. I get what you're saying. It's that trickle down effect that just keeps happening. Chrysler, GMC, these companies declare, like you were saying, Chapter 11. Then Detroit has to declare Chapter 12, and 100,000 other companies are affected negatively due to that, because I think it bears repeating. Even if you were a secured debtor. Secured creditor, you're not going to get a dollar for dollar comparison in these type of things. So you're going to have to write off some of that amount. You're going to have to eat some of that. So yeah, there are huge effects that are going on there. So with that being kind of an idea here that, hey, like you said, if you're in business to business, you're going to deal with this. It's not an if, it's a when type statement. And knowing that the effect, that domino effect, does reach far out. once a bankruptcy's been declared, whether it's by a customer, a supplier, a customer's customer, or however that goes, is there any best practices that a company can employ, things that they can do that'll help them out?
Yeah, so absolutely. Before you determine what to do, you need to learn what chapter bankruptcy this company is filed for.
Right.
Is it a Chapter 7? Is it a Chapter 11?
Sure.
Because obviously these things are, it could have very different results. The other thing to consider here is how much did you have outstanding. If it's not really a significant value, you may decide to walk away. If it's a significant value, you obviously want to get something back. So there's a couple of best practices that I would recommend. First of all, you need to carefully examine the sales for which your company is owed money.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take a careful look at the debtor's disclosure statements and do a reality test on the projections. Probably one of the most important is you need to cease all collection activities. The moment a debtor files a petition, an automatic stay is imposed on creditors. It's a bit like a pause button on any collection efforts or litigation or any other actions. There can be quite significant penalties for violators of this act. So that's part of the incentive for a debtor to file for relief is all collection activity will stop to give them time to sort of regroup.
Right.
The other thing you need to do is check recent payments. So if you received a substantial payment from this company in the last 90 days, there's a small chance that you may have to return it. So you might be wise to set that aside. But the last things you need to do is just stay on top of the details, keep meticulous records of all communication with the debtor, speak with the other creditors, find out what they're hearing, what they're seeing. And the last but not least is just seek advice from legal professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that last one we can't say enough in this type of thing that having that person that's their job, that's what they take care of is going to be well worth the time, effort, and cost of employing one of those people that'll help you out. Yeah, Mark, I appreciate that. We do have some questions, and I don't want to go too long into this. We said it was going to be a kind of an overview and a high level setup with some basic steps and things, and I think we've taken care of that. So, folks, please keep asking questions. We have a couple right now, and I'm happy to take any more that you have. Some of them I may say, hey, we're going to talk about that next time, which would be the next legal one. So just be aware of that. But the first one is how much value is having a relationship with the customer or the company? I'm assuming the company declaring bankruptcy in all of this.
I would suggest it's probably the most important factor in understanding whether you're going to get paid. There's no substitute for having a good relationship. Being in good communication between the debtor and the creditor is the most important thing, I think. Okay.
The question here, and this may be one, it kind of borders the line, so I'll ask you, and if you want to just say, hey, we'll let the lawyers talk about it on Thursday, that's fine. But do you basically, can you keep doing business with someone even if they're talking about but haven't filed for bankruptcy yet?
You can. It's completely up to you whether you want to do business with anyone. There are instances where a company would file for bankruptcy and you could be deemed a critical supplier and you would continue to deal with them even though they're in bankruptcy. So the answer is yes, you can still deal with them. If it was me making the decision and there was a risk that I wasn't going to get paid, I would be doing my best to reduce that risk by asking questions, maybe asking to see their financials, and basically putting yourself in a position where the risk is much lower.
Sure. Okay. This one, I know you're not going to have the exact numbers here, and I don't think that's what they're asking for, but John here is asking, how much do you expect bankruptcies to increase 2019 to 2020 and then 2020 to 2021? Kind of that, a continuation of that domino effect.
There's there's a couple of things going on here. So bankruptcy in itself is a legal event, and we are still seeing that some of the bankruptcy courts are closed.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we've even seen the the full extent as to what this pandemic is going to cause.
Okay.
But the other thing to consider is the majority of companies that go out of business don't file for bankruptcy. They just simply close the doors. Most of the cases, the creditors are paid. Again, I think I don't know the exact numbers. I think we can all, a common sense approach is we're going to see a vast change in the number of bankruptcies in the near future.
Right. And I'll make a little plug for, the COVID-19 index score that we have and how that works in with our normal credit score and how we've kind of set that up to try and help you as best we can as a company here with our data and everything like that. So let me get back to the questions here. And I'm going to say this isn't actually a question, Mark. Cindy, you asked about the 503B9 form. I will ask that question. I will copy that down and ask that question of our lawyers because that seems to be a bit of a technical question. So I will take that till Thursday. So please register for that and do that. And if you don't get a chance or if you have a conflict there, please reach out to me. My information, you can connect me on LinkedIn or email me at CreditSafe or whatever, and I will get that answer to you from Thursday. So I'll make sure that's done. But we do have some other questions. I just want to make sure that Cindy gets that. Can you talk more about vendors who are deemed critical after bankruptcy and declared? So just give an idea what that is a little bit when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think, again, this is probably one for the lawyer.
Sure. Okay.
Essentially, if someone's in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the idea is we want to reorganize the business to come out of this successfully. There's something to think about here. Not all companies that become bankrupt are insolvent, i.e. have no money or not making enough money to continue. There's various reasons the company go bankrupt. It could be litigation. It could be cash flow. It could be that they're extremely profitable. They're just not being paid by their customers, or there's been certain things that have gone on. So the idea of being a critical vendor is if your goods or service are critical to that company's success, you might be made a secured creditor to ensure that there's an incentive for you to continue doing business with this company and see them out of the bankruptcy. Okay,
so they can keep doing their job and get things paid and keep doing their business. You're critical for it.
And I think Scott, who's going to be leading the call on Thursday, will have a much better answer to that question than myself.
Sure, I'll make sure to include that on that one, and we'll get hopefully a few more deeper answers there. But I think you did. I think you answered the overall question. There weren't any follow-ups, so let's say that you answered that from an overview.
Continue on one of the questions we were asked in regards to the number of bankruptcies.
Sure.
From a CreditSafe experience dealing with our customers, we are seeing, slight negative behavior on the, but it's overall, we've been pleasantly surprised with the speed at which we're being paid and the lack of, the lack of bankruptcies. That could be because we're dealing with good customers, but overall, our experience is certainly not as negative as some of the media is portrayed. Sure.
Yeah, I think that's great to say. It bears that the old, if it bleeds, it leads type idea. Sensationalism does help fill those pages. So another question here from April, or a question from April. Let me say, how much of the pre-filing debt is usually paid? And then she said she's concerned about vendors who won't receive any form of payment for pre-filing debt, but then might be deemed as critical or might not. They still have to keep doing business. So you had some numbers on that earlier. You want to revisit that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was doing some research earlier, there's a suggestion that a secured creditor would, on average, receive about 77 cents on the dollar, whereby an unsecured creditor would receive 2 cents on the dollar. I think it's important to just to say here that every case is different.
Sure.
So those figures are going to vary vastly depending on the individual circumstances.
Right. Right. And that's where it comes into play a lot too. What you were talking about, those credit management policies to mitigate that exposure and cut down that risk of only getting even 77. Let's just use that as an average for that secured debt. 77 cents is still losing 33 cents on the dollar. So
one of the benefits of dealing with a company when they are bankrupt is they do have to declare certain pieces of information. So a lot of the information that's typically difficult to find from a private company becomes available when a company's in bankruptcy as well. So that's a benefit. So it's not necessarily, you've got more information to make that decision.
Right. Right. Yeah. Those are all there. And that's one of those things that we can say is make sure that your information is correct on that filing document, to make sure that not only the debt that you carry, don't do what I did and say 33 when it should be 23. But that your name, your information, your point of contact, all that type of stuff should be on those bankruptcy filing paperwork. Make sure that your information is correct and the debt load is correct. And then there is almost always a form inside of there with that you can send back as well. No, we're not lawyers, but we do understand this concept of what's going on here. So Mark, I think, we're running up against time here. We've cleaned up the questions. And I don't want to push it any further out time-wise here. I want to thank you so much for doing the research for this, for being a part of this, and for giving us some great information today. So thank you for that, first of all.
Thank you.
And to everyone out there, again, we have this whole week, we're taking care of the idea of bankruptcy. We have articles that are being posted. If you're not following our LinkedIn, if you're not following our Twitter, you're missing out on that content. We have videos that are going out. We have the information about the additional webinars, all that type of stuff. Feel free to connect to Mark or myself on LinkedIn. We would be happy to connect with you and any other professionals here in the area. In the market segment, and definitely register for, if you're interested in this topic, definitely register for that webinar that is going on Thursday, the 16th of July at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can find that information on our website and register there. It is free, but you do need to register to be able to get in. Thank you guys so much, and all of your comments, your engagement. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.